Our last task for the VirtualBox series of videos will be to install Windows Server 2022. And here are the tasks that I would like us to accomplish. First, we're going to create a virtual machine and we'll name it DC-01. We will change the network adapter to be host only Ethernet adapter number 2. We will install Windows Server 2022 on the virtual machine, install the VirtualBox Guest Additions, change the time zone if needed, enable remote desktop connection, change the IP address to have the following IP scheme. So we'll want the IP address to be 172.20.20.20. The subnet mask is going to be 255.255.255.0. The gateway will be 172.20.20.254. And the preferred DNS server will be 172.20.20.20. In other words, DC01 is going to be our DNS server. And lastly, we want to change the computer name to be DC-01. All right, so let's jump in. So first, we're going to create a virtual machine for Windows Server 2022. So similar to what we did for OpenSense, we'll click on New. For the name, it will be DC01. Since this server will be our first domain controller, we'll leave the folder location to be our vbox-storage folder on the D drive. For the ISO image, we'll click on the down arrow, then Other. Then we'll go to our Downloads folder and select our Windows Server 2022 ISO file and open it. Now, notice we're able to change our edition. If you've never performed a Windows Server installation before, you usually can only select these features after you've booted into Windows and start the installation. However, VirtualBox is giving us these options to select this now without having to go through the installation process. This feature is part of VirtualBox's unattended installation. So we can click on unattended install, and you can see that we can create a username and a password here. You can add a product key, assign a host name, and assign a domain name, and install the guest additions. But I don't want VirtualBox to create and modify these settings for us, so I will go back to Name and Operating System, and I will check the box to skip unattended installation. Since this is our first install, we'll go through it step by step to show you the complete installation process. Next, I'll go to Hardware, and I'll give it 4 GB of RAM, or 4096 megabytes. I'll bump up the CPU to be 2 CPUs. For hard disk, we'll leave it at 50 GB. Then I'll click on Finish. Now, before we power on our virtual machine, we'll go into Settings, then Network. For adapter 1, I will select Host Only Adapter, and we'll change the name to be VirtualBox Host Only Ethernet Adapter number 2. This adapter will place our Windows Server virtual machine within the same LAN network as our OpenSense virtual machine. I'll click on OK, then Start. And we'll wait for Windows to boot. After the boot process is completed, the first set of options we get is to select the language we want to install. We cannot change this as this is pre-selected when you download the ISO. You can change the time and currency format. You can change the keyboard or input method. I'll leave everything as default, then click Next. Next screen, you have 2 options to either install now or you can repair your computer if you're having issues. I'll click on Install Now to begin the setup. First, we need to select the operating system that we want to install. You can see that we have 2 versions of Windows Server. There is Standard and Data Center. Data Center have more features than Standards, so we'll go with Data Center. Next, we can choose either with Desktop Experience or without. Desktop Experience just means that it has a graphical user interface, and without means you just use a command line to administer Windows. This is what a server with desktop experience looks like. You can see I'm moving my mouse, I can open various applications, and this is what a server without desktop experience looks like. It's just a text-based interface where you can use PowerShell or command prompt to administer Windows. I will choose Windows Server 2022 Data Center Evaluation with Desktop Experience and click Next. I'll click I accept the Microsoft software license terms and click Next. Then we have two options to either upgrade or custom install. Upgrade is used if you have, let's say, like a Windows Server 2016 or 2019 version of Windows Server, and we want to upgrade it to like Windows Server 2022. And custom install is where you can install a fresh copy of Windows Server 2022. So I will choose custom install. Next, I will need to select my hard drive. I only have one option, so I'll just click Next. You don't need to perform any disk partitions or modifications of the drive. The installation will do that for us. I'll fast forward a bit to when the installation is completed. Once the installation is done, it will reboot automatically, or you can click Restart now if you don't want to wait. Once the reboot is done, you're asked to create a new password, and you can see that the username administrator is grayed out and you cannot change it. I'll create a new password for my administrator account. I will create a password domcontrol2024. Once I'm done with my password, I'll click on Finish. Then we're brought to the Windows logon screen, where it's asking us to press Ctrl plus Alt Delete to unlock the screen. Ctrl Alt Delete is known as a secure attention sequence, and when pressed, it will invoke an action directly on your operating system kernel, which is then processed and overrides whatever program you're currently running. So why am I telling you this? Because if you press Ctrl Alt Delete on your keyboard, your host machine, the computer that VirtualBox is installed on, will receive the action and your virtual machine will remain at the same lock screen. If you're a PC gamer and you're playing a game in full screen mode, even though the game has control of your mouse and keyboard, if you press Ctrl Alt Delete, it will override the game's control. Okay, so if I do what it says, it won't work. Well, thankfully, the developers that created VirtualBox thought about this, and they included some keyboard actions that you could use. If I click on Input, then Keyboard, you can see I have an option for Ctrl Alt Delete, or you can press your host key, which is right Control, plus the Delete key to unlock the Windows Server lock screen. So I will press that, right Control plus Delete. And you can see that my lock screen is unlocked and it's asking for a password. So we'll use that domcontrol2024 password that I created earlier. I'm finally logged into my Windows server, and before I do anything, notice that the virtual machine is really slow and the graphics is not really clear. It looks kind of blurry. Don't worry, your eyesight is not going bad. Similar to how a newly built computer will need drivers to function properly, with VirtualBox, we have these tools called Guest Additions that will work in the same way. Inside of my VirtualBox window, I'll click on Devices, then Insert Guest Additions CD Image. I'll go to my File Explorer, then this PC. And we can see our VirtualBox Guest Edition CD is now mounted. I'll open that, and we'll install the VirtualBox Windows Editions-AMD64. I'll right-click and open it. I'll click Next on the Welcome to Oracle VirtualBox Guest Setup. I'll leave the default install location and click Next. I'll leave the chosen components and click Install. Once the installation is done, I'll click Finish and leave the option checked to reboot our Windows Server virtual machine. The reboot is done, and I'll change my virtual machine to full screen mode. And now we can see that my virtual machine has taken up the entire screen and no longer looks blurry. First thing we can see in Windows Server is this application called Server Manager. This application is basically what we use to manage our Windows Server, and you can actually add other Windows Server to manage it from here. Under the Welcome to Server Manager text, we can see that we have these options to configure this local server, add rules and features, add other servers to manage, create a server group, and connect this server to cloud services. Then at the top right-hand corner, we have some more options. We can click on this icon to refresh Server Manager dashboard. We can click on this flag to show us any outstanding task that we have. We can click Manage to add and remove roles, add servers, create server group, and view the Server Manager properties. I can click on Tools to view various applications that I can use to manage this server. I can open Computer Management from here, Event Viewer, Services, and Windows PowerShell. Next is View. I'll increase the size to 150% so we're not all straining our eyesight. Then Help is basically where we can go to access Microsoft's documentation for Windows Server. Next, I'll click on Local Server, and we want to change a few things here. First thing I'll change is the time zone. It is currently set to Pacific time, but I'm in Eastern Standard Time, so I will make that change. This might be different for you if you're in a different region or a different country. Next, I'll enable Remote Desktop so I can remote into this server to manage it remotely. I'll change the option to allow remote connection to this computer. I'll close this little window that is telling me that Remote Desktop will add an exception to our firewall rules. I'll leave the option to allow connections only from computers running Remote Desktop with network level authentication. Then I'll click OK. Next, I'll change the IP address. I'll go to our network settings, right-click on Ethernet, go to Properties, click on Internet Protocol version 4, then Properties. I'll click the option to use the following IP address, and I'll enter 172.20.20.20 for the IP address, 255.255.255.0 for the sum.mask, and 172.20.20.254 for the default gateway. For the preferred DNS server, I'll use 172.20.20.20, which is the IP address for this server, because when we promote this server to be our domain controller, it will become a DNS server as well. I'll click OK, then Close. Then lastly, we'll change our computer name. I'll click on computer name, then go to change, and I'll change the computer name to be DC-01. Notice I use lowercase letters for these. Although case sensitivity doesn't really matter in Windows, I'll always like to use lowercase letters for my computer names. I'll click OK, then I'll get this message saying that we'll need to restart our computer for the change to take effect. I'll click OK, then close the System Properties window, then click Restart Now. When Windows completes its reboot, we'll sign in again and wait for Windows Server to open. Then we'll click on Local Server, and we can see all of the changes we've made survived the reboot, so we'll end it here. Okay, so these series of videos were just to show you how VirtualBox works. We've downloaded and installed VirtualBox. We've created a new network adapter. We've installed our OpenSense router with a LAN and WAN adapter. And we've just completed installing Windows Server 2022 and made some small configuration changes. With the tasks for VirtualBox completed, we'll move on to VMware Workstation next. And if you like VirtualBox and would prefer to use it for the remainder of the project, you're free to do so. But if you haven't seen what VMware Workstation and Hyper-V looks like, I'll advise you to stick around and watch those videos. Having options to compare and see what works best for you and your system might be worth your time. So I'll see you in those videos. Thanks very much for watching. If you find the information helpful, please feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel for future videos. Thank you.